few weeks ago. It was a misty morning, and I was working from home, so I went for a stroll before work. And walking through a park, the sun rose through the mist behind some trees, and it was truly gorgeous sight. And I saw a series of people stop, and a series of people take photos of it. And no doubt they all got on Instagram and Facebook. And I thought, whatever divides us all, this unites us. But that's like some chocolate box philosophy. Four people from four completely different ethnicities, religion, and background, standing, watching the beauty of the sun and appreciating it. But I spoke to two of them. I said, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" And they both stared at me because neither of them spoke English. This is multiculturalism in Britain. Four people dressed as though they live in four different countries, who live four different lives. All four of us in the clothing of our country of origin, speaking the language of our country of origin, mixing with people from our country of origin, practicing different religions in different buildings, completely unaware of each other, never touching each other. So I'm actually scared of interacting with local people. According to the ONS, 7.1% of people in Britain don't speak English as their main language. Now, I don't think it's unfair to say that we all know official statistics aren't really accurate, because take London, 1 in 12 people in London are illegal. I can guarantee you that 1 in 12 don't speak English as their main language. There are 1.7 million children in British schools right now who speak English as an additional language. We changed it from second. That wasn't inclusive enough a term. I lived next door to a couple of Czechs. Well, they weren't Czech, they were the grandchildren of Czechs who came over in the war. But they had Czech names, they spoke Czech fluently, they often went back, they were well in connect with their grandparents. But their first language was English, and culturally they lived as British people. They had assimilated, they had integrated. And this was what before the 1980s was the pitch with immigration. The economy would strive as tens of thousands of people from other parts of the world came and maintained their culture, their identity, their beliefs, their language, whilst also integrating, creating a rich tapestry of people with overlapping views and beliefs and lifestyle. But as multiculturalism began to become more the cool and hip thing to aim for, things changed. My friend lived in a street where on the other side of the road from him were subsidised rental housing association homes. And when I'd visit him, I'd see that there was a very clear distinction between the two sides of the road. The other side of the road didn't speak English in the street, struggled to communicate, looked afraid of outsiders as you came down their street. And I went to pick him up quite late at night once, and I noticed that everyone on that side of the road was still up. And I asked him about it, and he said, any time of the night, people on that side of the street are standing outside their houses, their lights are on, they're cooking, they're eating. But during the day, it's stony silent. that one side of the street had never adopted the idea of going to sleep when it's getting dark. They slept very late, well after midnight, probably 2 or 3 in the morning, and then they woke up late in the morning because they came from countries where it was very hot, and they'd adopted a lifestyle of eating much later and going to sleep much later and waking much later. Now, an entire street in London where one side of the street lives in a different time zone. On one side of the street, people get up, go to work for 9 in the morning, come home in the evening, maybe they go and do a bit of shopping, maybe they go jogging, they sit and watch TV, and by 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, the lights are out. But the other side of the street are going to bed at 6 in the morning. And when they do mix, even the third generation children, well, they dress in the clothing of their ancestors. They eat the food of their ancestors. They practice everything as though they were back home in their forefathers' country. They don't feel British first. I spoke to a taxi driver who kept referring to himself as from Pakistan and his country Pakistan and from Pakistan. And from his accent, I thought his English is very regional and dialectical. It doesn't sound to me like he grew up in Pakistan. And I asked him, were you born in Pakistan? Oh, no, he says. I go there 3 times a year. But my grandparents were. So he's third generation in Britain, but he doesn't view himself as British. He views himself as Pakistani. And not even British Pakistani. He views himself as a Pakistani living in Britain. Now, he was a really nice guy. Just like those people in the park at the beginning. There's so much that brings us together of common beliefs and attitudes and life and desires for our children. Remember the Sting song, The Russians Love Their Children Too. There's so much that unites us all. But multiculturalism has divided us all. It's created ghettos. It's created ghettos where people from one village or one small district live in one street. And they never mix with people from outside of their area. I remember a few years ago watching a video about a photo in the 1960s or 70s of a man selling ice cream to a young lady in a beautiful dress. She was clearly from the Indian subcontinent. Her family had just arrived. Well, I saw a recreation of the photo, and neither of them were any closer together. The beauty of it when this 7-year-old girl was buying an ice cream in her wonderful dress. Well, that woman's now in her 60s, and she still dresses the same. She still does her hair the same way. She still wears the same head covering. She still speaks the same language. She still mixes with people from her culture only. When I moved to London, one of the things I loved about it was the melting pot. People often say, oh, you get great food. I saw a YouTube video a while ago about Leicester and how it had become the first non-white town. And they were talking to local people about what they thought. And there were people who said, oh yeah, it's wonderful, it's amazing, it's great, I love it here, we're very accepting. And when they asked them about the riots between Muslim and Hindus and the attempt to attack temples, they were told, oh yeah, those just all outsiders. And it went through the video. Well, I noticed that people kept saying or you can get all sorts of food here. And I chuckled to myself because the one guy in particular, I thought, you can't actually think of anything that's worked about multiculturalism. So you say there's a great choice of food. You haven't internalised the fact that you think it's failed, but you can't actually think of anything that's worked. For centuries, Britain had small-scale immigration from all over the world, particularly all over Europe, where people assimilated over time. They kept their own practices. Think of the Orthodox Jews in North London who they still wear their dress, they still certainly practice their religion, they observe it in full, but they also observe the norms and rules of society, the fabric that holds everything together. Friend said to me, I came to Britain because I liked British attitude to things. I liked manners, I liked politeness, I liked the country. But he said to me, it's changed so much. And he highlighted the way people drive. And I have noticed, you go on a motorway, there's something I can't explain, is the underpassing. Now, there's always been underpassing on motorways, and there's always been aggressive drivers. But what I've noticed, particularly in the last year, is a large minority of people who often drive Audis, and not the small ones, who they don't want to go in the outside lane. So if you have 4 lanes on the motorway, they will very happily weave between traffic and undertake. But the outside lane is open. I was driving along, I think it was the M4, and I'm in the middle lane. There's no one on my outside, but I'm not pulling into the inside lane because I'm gaining on a lorry. And if I came in, I'd get trapped behind there with the car coming up behind me, would accelerate and box me in. So I kept in the middle lane until I could overtake. Well, while I was doing that, for maybe 2 minutes, 2 cars undertook me. Neither of them considered going in the outside lane. And I've seen a lot of drivers who simply do not want to drive in the fast lane. And I do question where this driving practice comes from, because I can't believe that they were taught that by a British driving instructor. In 2000, there were 4.7 million foreign-born people living in Britain. Now, we get over 1 million a year. So every 4 years, we add more foreign-born people to Britain than actually lived here in 2000. And this has changed culture and attitude. And you could say it's changed it for the better in many ways. Let's admit, what did they say? Nice food. So we have a variety of food. We have a variety of clothes for the school culture day. But we need to own up to the social ills that we have. We have much higher crime rates, which the government cannot and will not issue by ethnicity or immigration status. Everywhere where it has been issued, it's been a sobering experience. We have more barbershops than we have hairdressers. We have housing problems. We have an NHS in crisis. Well, we're told that foreign migrants save the NHS. The care system would collapse. We wouldn't be able to care for our old if we didn't have immigrants. Well, isn't it lucky that they will never grow old and need to be cared for? Oh, they will. Successive governments have followed easy, lazy policies. So instead of making sure that conditions and wages are suitable in care homes, we import people to work in those care homes, many of whom don't actually work in the care homes because they don't exist. We put a cap on the number of doctors that we can train. So that's why we don't have enough doctors, because we don't allow universities to train them. And then we say, oh my God, we're short of doctors, we need doctors, so we import doctors. If we trained twice as many doctors, maybe we wouldn't need to import so many doctors. And we do have plenty of people who want to be doctors, but aren't allowed to because there aren't enough places. I remember when the war in Ukraine broke out, one of the things that surprised me was how many foreign nationals were there studying to become doctors. So instead of training people to be doctors here, we don't allow them to have the spaces. So some British were going to Ukraine to study medicine in English so that they can come back, have equivalence of degree, and the doctors can maintain their union stranglehold on the number of doctor trainees to make sure their salaries are kept up. We're told Labour are going to build 1.5 million homes. They actually seem to have started to try and do something towards that plan. But with 1.4 million people coming last year, and let's just say 1 million for the next 5, well, you need 3 million homes. So we're not solving the homes crisis. We're just paving over the countryside to make room for more migrants, who we then won't integrate, will encourage to live separate lives, and we'll end up with more and more ghettos. Multiculturalism has failed, and unless we admit that, and we try to create a country where people can both have and live a British life, which presumably they came here for that, whilst at the same time maintaining the essence of their culture and background, we will have a failed country. And Labour's plans to push out newcomers and illegal migrants around the country so that everyone carries their share of the load will accelerate disenchantment with this entire process. And multiculturalism's baked into the DNA of the modern Labour Party. They see them as their core voters. That's why they can't define the working man. So nothing will be done to create integration. It'll be all about meeting with communities, not integrating communities. So, in 4 years' time, when there's the next election, will anyone actually put together a credible set of policies which will build a united country?